My name's Tucker Rossetto. I'm 21 years old and I'm a cadet second lieutenant in Army ROTC. I agreed with Barack that we should never invaded Iraq in the first place. I spoke out about it in high school. I was strongly opposed to it. People ask how being in the military back then in high school, how I could be opposed to going to war. Like, aren't you excited to go into the Army and stuff? Yeah, but not to go to war, not to go to an unnecessary war. And so I agreed with him to oppose it. After we did it, seeing what we did, I wanted to stay and fix things. So I agreed with Obama's opposition, but then to an extent, John McCain's wanting to stay. And there was no pressing reason at the time that I saw to go into Iraq, whereas there was obviously a pressing reason to stay in Afghanistan. We went there to pursue the people that committed 9/11. We didn't finish the job. We removed the Taliban. We destabilized the region, but we didn't get Osama. There were still militants in the mountains. There was a lot of work to be done there, and I didn't see any pressing threat coming from Iraq, any reason why we would need to lose focus on what I thought was the more important, more pertinent mission. The Iraqi government had nothing to do with 9/11. I thought that we were being taken advantage of following 9/11. It was just never an invasion I supported. I didn't think it was necessary, and I still don't think so. And a lot of people, even back then, predicted what was going to happen, that it was going to lead to a quagmire or sectarian violence. Cheney himself said it back in the 90s, so the signs were there that it wasn't a smart decision, and I opposed it from the beginning. But after we did it, I believe we had a responsibility to fix it.
Robert Sarr. I'm an associate professor of political science at Oregon State. I teach courses in public opinion, politics and media, American politics, the presidency, and those kinds of topics. So I pay a lot of attention to how media cover various issues and how public develops their opinions about things. And one of the things that clearly made a difference in this election was John McCain's position on the war, also Barack Obama's, but especially John McCain. And a main reason for that was that he was, of course, very strongly in favor of the war, and public opinion is very strongly against the war, and so it limited what John McCain could appeal to voters on, because if they disagreed on the war and that was important to them, they probably would not listen to other things that John McCain had to say that they might in fact agree with.
The reason why this nation is so great, we can all vote however we want, for whatever reason we want, and a lot of people in the military are going to vote for the Republican candidate, John McCain or not, just because they tend to be more likely to pay more attention to raising their cost of living allowances. The pay went up a lot. When Republicans are in office, usually military gets pay raises on an annual basis. Housing, everything in the military, when there's a Republican in the White House, a lot of times gets a lot more attention than the other way. And so whether or not that's what makes every single person vote for John McCain or for a Republican, I'm not sure. But it's got to have a lot to do with it. It's got to have a lot to do with it.
In reality, in fact, one of the questions I ask students on an anonymous questionnaire, where they don't tell me who they are, but I can look at the data, is I ask them under which of these sets of presidents did defense spending adjusted for inflation increase: Democrats Kennedy, Johnson, and Carter, or Republicans Nixon, Ford, and George Herbert Walker Bush, the former president. And almost everybody guesses it was under the Republicans that defense spending increased. But if you think about what was happening under each of those three sets, under the Democrats, war was ongoing or war was starting. And so actually defense spending rose under those three presidents, those three Democrats. And if you think of the Republicans, Nixon and Ford were in at the end of the Vietnam War, and George Herbert Walker Bush was in at the end of the Cold War. Defense spending actually fell quite sharply, adjusted for inflation, under all three of those presidents. And ironically, Vice President Cheney was Secretary of Defense under former President George Herbert Walker Bush, and defense spending fell while he was Secretary of Defense. So, but that's the impression, that Democrats cut defense spending and Republicans raised it. It doesn't always fit with reality, but it's important to recognize that stereotype.